I saw it an email from Rachel, no subject line. Just a few words, Papa, please don't come for the wedding. You can watch it on live stream. I moved the cursor slowly, reading it again, then again. The words remained the same. Below, she'd written a line or two, something about Andrew's family wanting to keep the ceremony intimate and how the guest list had to be kept very small. A Google Meet link followed, and then a little joke, it'll feel like you're right there. LOL. I leaned back in my chair. The smell of coffee mixed with the familiar scent of wood, something I've grown used to in this old kitchen. There's a photograph on the wall, my wedding day with her mother. The colours have faded, but the memory hasn't. When my wife passed away, I made her a promise. Right there at her bedside, I told her I'd take care of the children, stand by them, until they could stand on their own. That promise stayed with me through the rains, through the checks for college fees, through those late nights waiting in the car park after classes or parties. I still remember the receipt, $30,000 wired to a venue in Napa Valley. I'd left the bank late that day, picked up an apple pie on the way home because Rachel said once she liked it. I never thought of it as buying my place at the wedding. I just wanted her to have a good day, a beautiful day. That's what any father wants, no. I scrolled down, stopped at the reply box. My fingers were a little cold. I typed just 4 words, sure, enjoy your big day. No punctuation, no fuss, just that. The kitchen was quiet. The fridge made that low humming sound like it always does. The sunlight shifted slightly, slipping off the edge of the table. I took a sip. The coffee had gone cold, more bitter now. Outside, the lady next door was walking her grey dog. Its collar jingled softly. On the fridge door, Rachel's wedding date was still circled in red marker, right next to the grocery list for Sunday dinner. I looked back at the screen. No thank you, no let's talk, just an instruction and a link. No anger rose within me, no hurt either, just silence, a kind of stillness, like the thick layer of coffee froth that settles quietly at the bottom of the cup. Perhaps somewhere along the way, something between us shifted. Once I was part of her journey. Now I'm simply someone watching from afar. I closed the laptop, took a deep breath, and as I placed the mug in the sink, the thought came to me as clearly as the total on a receipt. I know what I must do next. On the way to the office this morning, the radio played an old tune from the 80s. It was one of those melodies you don't realize you remember until it slows down your foot on the accelerator. Outside, Portland blurred in a light drizzle, and just like that, I was taken back to 2015, that first morning after the funeral. The house was unusually quiet. On the fridge, my wife's note, "Buy milk bread," was still stuck where she had left it. The wedding photograph on the wall, it felt like the eyes in it were watching over everything. I remember standing at the sink, washing the 2 bowls left over from the casseroles neighbors had brought. I wasn't thinking big thoughts, just this get to work on time, drop the kids to school. We'll figure out the rest in the evening. That's how adulthood works most days. You carry on. The years after that passed in the sound of dishwashers, the smell of cheap petrol, and the numbers blinking on the school fee portals. I remember the old minivan with that forest-scented air freshener hanging from the mirror. I used to drive Rachel through winding, rain-wet roads to her campus. We unloaded cardboard boxes, Target bags, and a rolled-up mattress topper. In that small dorm room, I fixed up a shelf with one of those hex key kits, the kind every father learns to use at some point. Rachel gave me a quick hug. "Papa, go now, I'll be fine." I nodded, walked back to the car park. There was a maple tree at the edge. Leaves were falling even though there was no wind. I took out my phone, opened the fee portal. The total came up. I took a deep breath and pressed confirm payment. Sometimes love is just that. Clicking pay now and driving back home in the rain. On nights I couldn't manage a proper meal, I'd make instant noodles crack in an egg sprinkle some fried onions. Luke would sit across eating while telling me about his internship. Later, when Luke wanted to buy his first home, a modest flat a bit far from the city, I went along with him to the bank. The officer spoke about credit scores and fixed rates. My son looked at me. I signed the cosigner form without a second thought. as if it was the most natural thing to do. On the way back, we stopped at Home Depot, picked up a cheap toolkit, and I showed him how to change a tap filter and fit rubber seals to door frames. It's these small things that make a new house feel less unfamiliar. I've kept the same job at Caldwell Walker. I come in early, leave on time. Robert sometimes leaves a latte on my desk. He doesn't ask too many questions. On most evenings, I walk into the kitchen switch on the light, hang up my coat. The fridge hums in the background, and I feel it, the house is still standing. One person less, yes, but standing nonetheless. Storms are not weathered by grand declarations. They're weathered by bills paid on time, dinner served at 8, and an umbrella always kept by the door. This morning, as the wipers cleared another arc across the windshield, Rachel's email floated back into my mind like an old slide projected across a reel of memories. The same child, but two very different images. One a dorm room on orientation day, the smell of new mattresses, that quick hug. The other a sentence that read, "You can watch online." The contrast moved through my chest and settled in my stomach, cold but not painful. I flicked on the indicator meant to turn into Park Street. That's when the phone on the mount flashed. A new voicemail from Rachel. I glanced at the road sign and instead turned toward the street with the First Federal Bank branch. The glass doors of the bank reflected my face, the same forehead, a few familiar lines, but the eyes had changed. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The soft Portland afternoon light streamed through the tall windows, and the stone floor glistened faintly, like it had been freshly waxed. At the counter, Carlos looked up and smiled, the polite practice smile of someone who's seen you walk in for years. "Good afternoon, Mr. Collins. What can I help you with today? I'd like to cancel a payment," I said, my voice even. "A transfer of $50,000 for a wedding venue in Napa Valley." Carlos paused ever so slightly, then gestured for me to have a seat. I placed my wallet on the desk, folded my hands. For a brief second, I recalled the first time I'd made that deposit, stepping out of the bank just before sunset, stopping by the bakery to pick up an apple pie, because Rachel had mentioned she felt like having one. At the time, I thought I was simply contributing to her big day, just doing my part to make it special. "You're sure?" Carlos asked, eyes scanning his screen. "It's a sizable amount. Let me check." "Fortunately, it's still pending. The circumstances have changed," I replied. "I'd like to cancel it." He printed out a stack of papers and slid them towards me. The faint smell of fresh ink lingered. I skimmed through, quickly marked my name in the box, and signed below the fine print requester's signature. The ballpoint clicked gently as I finished. I thought of all the times I'd clicked pay now for tuition, for rent, for return flight tickets. When you care about someone, the money is rarely the hard part. The real difficulty is knowing when to stop. Carlos looked at me once more as if to confirm I hadn't made a mistake. "I'll take care of it right away. There may be a small cancellation fee." "That's all right," I said. "Thank you, Carlos. My pleasure, Mr. Collins. If you need help adjusting your savings or retirement plan, just let me know." I stood up. In that fleeting moment, it felt like I'd finally let go of a rope I had been gripping for far too long. Just as I stepped into the lobby, my phone began to vibrate in my pocket again and again. Rachel's name flashed on the screen. I didn't answer. We don't always need to respond immediately to prove we care. Sometimes silence gives each person the space to see things clearly. The evening breeze passed gently through the awning of the bank. I walked slowly across the parking lot, opened the car door. The steering wheel felt cool to the touch. I got in and exhaled a long breath. The city hadn't changed traffic lights, turning people walking past with paper bags from the farmer's market, a little boy riding his cycle in a red helmet. I drove home, taking the familiar route. By the time I turned onto our lane, the sun had already begun to dip. The porch light from our house spilled a soft golden streak down the steps, and there on the front stoop sat a figure, shoulders tucked in against the breeze. I turned off the engine, held the keys in my hand, and stepped out of the car. The doorbell rang just as I was hanging up my coat. The porch light cast a warm golden streak across the damp steps. I opened the door. Luke stood there, tie-loosened eyes still carrying the weariness of the day. "Come in, Beta," I said, stepping aside to let him through. Only the light over the kitchen island was on. The fridge hummed softly, filling the silence. On the long wooden table, the same scorched trivet still lay there, a mark from one of our old family dinners. Luke didn't sit. "You didn't pick up," he said. "Rachel's in a panic. The venue has been calling non-stop." I poured him a glass of water and slid it towards him. "Sit down, son." He braced himself against the chair, then sat body still, tense as if ready to spring up again. "Did you really cancel the transfer?" he asked. "The whole plan is falling apart now. Andrew's family is redoing the entire list. They're quite upset." "Let's keep things simple tonight," I said, keeping my voice steady. "You know I had already paid before Luke, and then I was taken off the guest list. Those two things go hand in hand, but can't you just help this one last time? Let the wedding happen smoothly first. We can talk about attendance later," he said, looking straight at me. "You know how Rachel is. She's under a lot of pressure from that side. Just this once, Papa. Help her." I turned the glass slowly in my hand, letting the chill settle into my fingers. Helping doesn't always mean writing a check. Some things people need to handle on their own. "You say that so easily," he scoffed, almost laughing under his breath. "But the reality is they need to make the payment by tomorrow morning. If it's late, they'll lose the deposit. Everyone on Andrew's side is watching her." I took a deep breath. I understand the pressure. But I can't be asked to watch the wedding online and pay for the banquet. Tell me honestly, does that feel right to you? His eyes dropped for a moment, then looked back at me. "You're making this bigger than it is. You always do this, Papa. You turn everything into something personal." The air in the kitchen seemed to thicken. I rested my hand on the arm of the chair, that old wooden creak so familiar. So many things had unfolded around this table. Instant noodles on rushed nights, mother and daughter arguing about silly things, long silences, and noisy laughter. I decided to say little. "Luke," I said quietly, "let's leave it here tonight. Go home, get some rest, Papa." He shot up from his chair, palms open then clenched. "I just want things to go smoothly. Just this once, help her out." "I've helped many times," I replied, pushing the chair gently back into place. "And I'm still her father, with or without being at the ceremony. But attendance shouldn't be something I have to buy." He looked at me, then jaw twitching, as if he had more to say, but stopped himself. I walked to the door and unlatched it. A gust of cool air slipped into the kitchen, rustling the bill pinned on the fridge. "It's getting late," I said softly. "You have office tomorrow." Luke stepped onto the porch. I'll talk to Rachel," he murmured, slipping his hands into his pockets. "Good night, Papa. Good night, son." I closed the door behind him. The click of the latch was quiet, but familiar, comforting even. The kitchen dimmed further as I switched off the island light, leaving only the soft glow from the oven panel. I stood by the counter, listening to the sound of Luke's car starting and pulling away. Then the phone screen lit up on the table. A new message slid across the top. "Rachel, Papa, please. Just hear me out." The pale blue glow touched the edge of the wooden surface like a ring of water left behind by a melting glass. I looked at it for a moment, didn't reach for it. Somewhere deep down, I knew the real conversation was just beginning. In the morning, as I switched on my phone, the screen showed 43 missed calls. At the top of my inbox, one subject line stood out: "Please don't ruin my wedding." I leaned back in my chair, hand still resting on the mouse. It was a long email from Rachel. She wrote that perhaps things could be more flexible, that I could attend the wedding if the payment was made promptly. Below that were timelines, deadlines from the venue, reminders from the florist, and of course a payment link. No apology, just a proposal. I switched off the screen and opened the file I had been working on. Robert passed by my desk, placing a warm latte near my keyboard, the lid still holding a trace of steam. "Lunch with me today?" he asked, like he always did. I nodded, pulled my chair in, signed a few contracts, and stuck color-coded tabs where needed. The faint aroma of coffee lingered, just like that morning years ago when I dropped Rachel at university. We had stopped at a cafe near her campus. She'd insisted Papa try this one. It's not as bitter as your cappuccino. At noon, we crossed the road to a new Italian place that had just opened. Light wood tables, warm, lighting the scent of tomato sauce and fresh bread. Robert ordered pasta arrabbiata. I chose lemon-roasted chicken with a side of salad. He waited until the waiter had walked away before asking, "Trouble with your daughter?" I gave him the bare outline, the email from last night, the conversation with Luke, and this morning's message. Robert listened without interrupting. He tore off a piece of bread, dipped it lightly into the olive oil, and said almost to himself, "Michael, for a long time, we believe love means saying yes. But as we grow older, we realize we teach our children through boundaries, not to punish, but to remind them that love is not a blank check." I stayed silent. Outside the window, Portland wore its usual soft grey. The waiter brought our plates, smiling in joy. Robert gestured for me to serve myself first, then continued, "I have grandchildren now. The older one, her grandmother, says yes to everything, so she throws a tantrum every time someone says no. The younger one stays more with me. I say no when needed. She doesn't like it, but she understands. And one day she'll learn how to balance things herself." He looked at me and said, "When there are no boundaries, even love becomes a convenience, something people think they can use." I cut a piece of chicken, listening to the quiet ting of the knife on the plate. In my mind, Rachel's line kept flashing, "We can talk about you attending if the payment is made first." A part of me wanted to respond right away, just to put an end to all the noise. But another part, quieter, deeper, reminded me of yesterday morning in the kitchen. I hadn't been invited, I had only been allowed to watch. "Do you need me to say this out loud?" Robert asked gently, setting down his fork. "Your daughter loves you, but right now she's scared of things falling apart, of losing face. Fear makes people say unfair things. If you respond with money, she'll learn that a father's love has a price. But if you respond with silence, she'll have to learn something more important." I exhaled slowly. "I've never felt light saying no," I admitted. "But today, I do." Robert smiled, reached for the bill. He added a generous tip, placed his card in the tray, and said softly, "Looking after someone isn't just about footing the bill. Sometimes it means letting them stand on their own feet. That, too, is love." As we stepped out, he patted my shoulder. "Walk a few extra minutes, it'll warm you up." Later that afternoon, I returned to the office and wrapped up the remaining work. Before logging off, I opened a new email and typed a single line to Rachel. "I've read your message. When you're ready for a real conversation, I'll be here." No mention of the money, no debate. The road home was damp with dew. I turned onto our small lane where the maple trees had already started sprouting fresh leaves. The porch light had come on by itself, casting a soft golden band across the steps. There, waiting with a paper coffee cup in her hands, was Sophia, Rachel's best friend since 5th grade. She stood up as soon as she saw me. "Uncle Collins," she said, voice gentle, "I hope it's all right. I have something I'd really like to tell you." Sophia stood up just as I opened the door, her empty paper cup crumpled in one hand, eyes unsure. The Portland evening was still and quiet. Behind me on the shelf, our wedding photograph stood in its dark wooden frame. "I'm sorry I came this late," she said softly. "Rachel's really overwhelmed. The venue's gone, the florist cancelled, and the caterer is threatening to walk out. I just wanted to ask, is there any way you might reconsider?" I led her into the kitchen. The kettle on the stove started clicking gently as it heated. "Sophia," I said, "I know she's anxious, but whether I'm there or not cannot be linked to a payment. If my presence comes with conditions, it's no longer presence. It's a transaction." She looked down. "I do understand what you mean. But Rachel said, if you were there, things might feel all right again. She's revised the guest list. She said she's ready to make space for you." I shook my head. "I still love her the same. This home will always be open for her and me to talk, but I won't negotiate affection. Not today, not ever." We sat at the table. I poured tea into 2 ceramic mugs, the steam forming a gentle mist between us. Sophia turned her cup slowly in her hands. When we were in 5th grade, we stayed over at your place. She smiled faintly. You made pancakes that were slightly burnt, but Rachel finished all of hers. She said, Papa made it. That's how it's supposed to taste. She looked up at me. She's not a bad person, Uncle. She's just scared everything will fall apart. And when we're scared, we cling to whatever's still within reach. I believe you, I said. Fear makes us say things that aren't always fair. But at some point, we all have to learn our own lessons. Sophia stood up after the 2nd cup. At the door, she turned back. I'll talk to Rachel. Whatever happens, thank you for listening. She gave me a quick hug, the polite kind, the way Americans do, and stepped down the porch steps. The automatic light blinked on, casting a soft golden glow across her retreating steps. A few weeks later, I received a card they had held the ceremony in Andrew's backyard. The photo printed on it showed fairy lights strung across an oak tree, a few old wooden chairs, and a modest wedding cake. My name wasn't on the guest list. I placed the card on the shelf and pulled out a blank one. I wrote, wishing you both peace and the wisdom to be kind to one another. I tucked in a gift card for a local homeware store, then walked back to the kitchen, washed the cups, wiped the counter slowly, but with care. One rainy evening, a long email from Rachel arrived. Half apology, half explanation stories about pressure from relatives, a few photos attached at the end. I read it once, didn't reply right away. Because when love comes with conditions, it turns into a receipt. The best kind of love doesn't require proof of purchase. A month passed. Summer had settled in. On a quiet Thursday evening, I placed a cardboard box on the kitchen table. Inside was a ceramic bowl I had shaped in my pottery class. Pale glaze, smooth finish date etched at the bottom. I wrapped it carefully in brown paper, padded it with bubble wrap, and stuck on the postage. Before sealing it, I slipped in a small note. I hope you eat well wherever you are. When you're ready, I'll still be here. I locked the door and stepped out. The breeze was cool and dry. I could smell fresh-cut grass from the neighbor's yard. Tucking the box under my arm, I headed toward the car. At the park around the corner, the lights at the community center were already on. Pottery class would start in 15 minutes. I thought about what I might make next, maybe a soup bowl for chilly evenings, and turned the key in the ignition. There are times in life when we help by showing up, and there are times when we help by stepping back, allowing the other person to find their balance. I'm not angry with my daughter. I've simply chosen another way to love her. And tonight at that wooden wheel in the community center, I will relearn an old lesson: patience, placing your hands just right and letting the clay take shape on its own. I sealed the parcel and headed to class. These hands have slowly learned how to apply just enough pressure, much like fatherhood. I've come to understand that boundaries don't drive love away, they help it stand upright. Sometimes saying no is how we say I'm still here, just giving you the space to stand on your own. In life, a seat at the table is not earned through guilt or money. It's held through mutual respect, the ability to listen, and the courage to return when the time is right. If this story resonates with you, I'd love to hear from you, maybe a time when you set a boundary to protect something sacred in your family. I'm listening.